the idea was that my roommate came home, told me about chiropractic. He discovered this new thing, chiropractic. He had met Fred Rieckman. Fred Rieckman had told him about the concept of homeostasis and how if the body was left alone and it was left to do what it was ideally set up to do at birth, without interference, that it would work at its optimum. It would do its best to take care of itself and achieve the potentials that it was capable of achieving. So that's what I'm looking for. It's just something about that idea.
Well, you know, you can go back a little bit further. In fact, you can go back past where most of us can remember, which is basically a sperm and an egg meeting each other. And all of a sudden, the genetic codes start to develop right from the beginning. The division of cells. Before long, within 4 weeks, you have a little bud forming with a brain on top. First recognizable structure you'll ever see is the top portion of the body, which is the brain. Why does that develop first? Simply because the body needs to be developed, and the brain will choreograph everything that's taking place within the body for the next 9 months. Within a couple of weeks, you start seeing recognizable structures. Within 4 months or so, you have actually what we see as a human being. So for 9 months, what's taking place is, without us even having a word to say about it, little fingernails forming, hair forming, organs forming, systems developing. And finally, at the end of that period of time, we have a human being. Without any interruption, fortunately, from us, that will all take place. I remember when we were in schools, the first time I was ever present at a birth. A baby was born, and the baby came out and had a long fingernail, and was flailing and scratched its face. And there was a nice streak there, a little blood, had really cut itself. And one of the midwives took this coating that was on this baby's body. It's called vernix caseosa, which is basically this waxy substance that is on this little baby's body because this baby has been in a liquid medium for its entire life, 9 months. And it coats it very much like a swimmer who swims the English Channel. They'll coat their body with Vaseline and oils so that it can protect them from the cold, can protect them from friction, can protect them from the elements. Well, this baby has the same coating. Well, this midwife picked up the arm of this baby and actually took a little bit of this viscousy cream off of this child that was there to protect the child, and rubbed it on the face. Do you know, in a couple of hours, you couldn't even see where the child had scratched itself. With us, it would be a 5-day process. My point is that later on, as soon as organization of an educated mind got into the birth process, they'd get these babies off and they'd wash the baby. And they'd say, dirty baby, with all this stuff that's on this baby's body, when within a couple of hours, most of the time, the body will absorb that to make the skin thicker, to protect that child now that it's out in this environment. And a dirty baby, when really the body needed no help, just no interference. And that's probably the best expression that I've ever heard pertaining to the human body, homeostasis, what this body needs or doesn't need. The body does it all itself, most of the time. I can't say that enough, that interference is the big key, and there's so many different types of interference that take place in the human body, and how we come in and try and determine exactly what is right and wrong for this human body. You were telling me a few minutes ago your interest in digestion. and, you know, maybe even the purpose of your film. And I was thinking about it because there's so many systems that are formed within this body. We know a good deal about most of these systems, but we really don't know what's happening in most of them. And when it comes down to it, digestive system is probably one of the best systems to pull out and take a look at, because it really shows from the start to the finish exactly what this body's doing. Take a morsel of food. Well, there's something inside this body that tells us we're hungry. There's a whole system that goes on from the brain. It detects something that's going on down below. And we reach for a morsel of food, either with a fork or a hand or whatever. And the body tells us most of the time when we're listening to it what we should be eating and how we should be eating it. And we pick it up to our mouth with a muscle system and a nervous system directed by the brain. And as soon as we put that in our mouth, the whole thing begins. The digestion begins. We have digestive enzymes and breaking that food apart before it even gets broken apart in the body. We have teeth that are designed individually through evolution and how we've needed them to gnaw away. We transfer that food unconsciously to different parts of our mouth. We have a little bit of a dense portion of that food. We pass it on to the grinders. And then we move it around the mouth. And we determine what it is by portions of our tongue that have little papillae that tell us whether it's sweet, whether it's bitter, whether it's, whatever is taking place that detects and allows our senses. And then from there, it breaks down a little bit more, and our tongue passes it backwards. And then we have this movement of our throat. And then we swallow it with what we call peristalsis, that all of a sudden contracts and expands, contracts and expands, and then moves down through an esophagus. And since there are stomach acids building up and waiting to break it apart, we're given a mucous membrane that actually surrounds this tube internally to protect the tube itself from these acids that are waiting for it to break it apart. Lands in the stomach, the food gets broken apart, moves down through other valves and openings, and finally ends up, we've passed a few areas we're not even discussing, or maybe we don't even know about, into an intestine that is scrunched up like a puzzle inside the body. And it does that, and then finally it reaches, has little hairs that reach out, called cilia, to reach out and actually detect certain things going on with this food, which foods are good, which foods aren't, what part of this food isn't good, what it will take in through the membrane and what it won't, passes it on a little bit further into this colon, and the colon actually, 22 feet to 25 feet of digestive system, of intestine. And then again, it will take and remove what it wants, and all along fluids are being sent here, fluids are being sent there. There's a blood system that actually feeds into and out of, and nervous system takes place, is shooting all kinds of information. And then on the other side, whatever it doesn't want, whatever it sees as waste, by the way, it sees waste that we didn't even see when we put that into our mouth, yet the body knows. And whatever it doesn't want, it sends out the other end. And it's very complete. Talk about the body needing no help, just no interference. It helps us eliminate interference. But very often, we interfere with what we should be doing, what we shouldn't. And of course, the educated mind can help us in determining what takes place. But for the most part, that's really, not that necessary for us to do if we can truly, truly listen to our bodies. And listening to our bodies is really an art, a real art to determine what each individual needs to have a happy and healthy life. And that's sort of what I see taking place in all areas of our body. I want to shut that off. My phone is ringing.
is such a beautiful shot here, actually, David. If you realize this, let's see if I can hold this still. Can you go on even still?
Well, you know, you were asking about what I do, and it's a real obvious thing. In fact, there's an expression, the obvious is the last thing we think, see, or do. Very often. We take a lot for granted. This is an interesting model. This is the spine. Everyone has them. Human beings, that is. And here we have this brain that sits up on top of the body. And it's the major coordinator, battery, generator. It sends messages through a base of the skull. And those messages move from the brain stem down through the spinal cord. And the spinal cord is an extension of the brain. And in between each one of these vertebrae sits this nerve, this cable that comes off of the spinal cord and actually moves and supplies every cell, tissue, and organ in the human body. This one over here makes my fingers move. This one over here makes my heart beat, my lungs, my pancreas, spleen, large, small intestine, ovaries or reproductive system, knees. Everything in this body has a cable coming from the brain. So in the physical form, you actually can link on to most of the supply within the body. The problem is, because we need to protect this, we have a spine, and because we move around the way we do, we're not given a straight tube to protect it. We're given 24 movable vertebrae. And any one of these vertebrae can move out of position. And we know what happens when it's a severe injury to the spinal cord or the nervous system. We can be paralyzed. We can even die, because mostly everything comes through here first and the heart stops. But we're talking about even a slight misalignment, which will take place. And what the body will do is it will send a message to the opposing area to pull it back. Again, the intelligence of the body. And I think that the two words that I'd rather not leave out here when we talk about the body needing no help, just no interference, is that whatever you want to call it, there's this master intelligence that seems to be running the show. And that master intelligence, in chiropractic we call it a universal intelligence, it has appointed an intelligence to run this body. We call it innate intelligence. And that innate intelligence runs every cell, tissue, organ within the body. It's appointed the brain to do that. And the brain coordinates and controls the function of every cell, tissue, and organ. And that's incredible, because there's an innate intelligence that is constantly looking out for us, constantly knowing how we can adapt to the environment. And adaptation is a big key when we talk about all this. You know, as human beings, if I sit here right now and you were to open this door, well, it's very nice and warm. It's probably around 72 degrees in this house right now. It's the winter time. You open the door, quickly the temperature would drop in this room. And slowly, within a couple of minutes, it would drop to 71, 70, 69. As a human being, what happens in my body? I have the ability to adapt. Adaptation. First thing that happens is the middle of my body recognizes that it's cold. There's a thermostat in my brain that tells me, you know, David, it's cold in here. And what takes place? Well, all of a sudden, the body, to protect the core, will shut down the periphery. We have goosebumps. You know what goosebumps are? Goosebumps are the body taking the skin and actually contracting it, not allowing the body's heat to escape. Adaptation. It's the key to actually thriving on the planet. And adaptation is one of the big keys to homeostasis. It's one of the results. It's one of the things that this innate intelligence in the human body will do to allow us to exist. And these are the main things that I wanted to talk to you about today, because they're so important to me. And they're things that we really do take for granted because all of us experience these. You know, you think about the birth process and you think about how incredible it is. We do take it for granted. Why? Because everybody goes through it. It's not such a big thing. You were born, I was born, today you go to the hospital, there's 20 people being born, there's people being born in houses. There's literally millions of people being born every year. So we do take it for granted, yet we look past the miracle of it all, of what's taking place, and what is our role in it. And our role is not that great if we allow it to take place. In fact, the biggest role we have is allowing it to do so. Thank you.
Beautiful, David.
So what do you think? Can you pull anything out of it?
Excellent.